Hello and welcome once again to the Cap Ball Saloon. I am, of course, your host, Anders E.T. Herzberg, welcoming you once again. For today's episode, we have a ton of topics to cover, everything from brand new tech entering into the firearms industry, as well as the fight for the Second Amendment continues despite the GOP's best efforts to roll over. All that and more on this episode of the Cap and Ball Saloon. But first, a quick word about Cap and Ball Digital Strategies. My personal digital marketing agency. We are a Second Amendment focused digital marketing agency offering our services specifically to FFLs and others in the second community to help you grow your bottom line. So if you'd like to learn more about how we can help you out, visit us at capandballseo.com. Now, let's get into today's topics. First up for today's topics, I wanted to go over really quickly some interesting information we can glean from the YouTube and Guns Q&A roundtable on the Forgotten Weapons channel that was published recently. I thought this was rather interesting, and there were a few points that I wanted to pull out here from this particular video. In particular, Ian's point about not liking YouTube, specifically not liking content that might unnerve advertisers, is kind of right in my opinion, but YouTube can and will still put ads on videos that are not monetized. If anything, I think it's more about they're getting more and more aggressive with their ads. However, I do agree with his thoughts on YouTube wanting to be a TV network for all intents and purposes. I mean, look at the YouTube Premium subscription and the various features and different programs that they've tried to off and on roll out over the years. But ultimately, I really do think YouTube will do what's best for their viewer retention and revenue at the end of the day. So when it comes down to how much pressure is being put on them by advertisers about specific kinds of content, with the cultural shift that is currently happening to be slightly more pro 2A, especially with the wave of states that we've seen pass more and more constitutional carry bills, I do think we might see some kind of a loosening of the policies in place at social media channel or platforms like YouTube. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be what we want or what it should be, but I do think things are slowly kind of getting better. So at least there is some room for hope, at least in my personal opinion. I do think Zyga is onto something with the credit card payment processors possibly being a major source of influence. And I think that the change in attitude that Zyga has been mentioning when he was talking about how some of his shorts and other stuff are now starting to actually get monetized is stemming from some recent changes that banks and payment processors have made. Specifically, I wanted to bring up Citigroup's reversal on its firearms content policy after Trump called out US banks. I think this somewhat shift in tone from processors and banks like Citigroup might also be an influence, further supporting my argument that things are starting to shift a little bit more favorably in our direction. But in general, is there anything else that we can kind of learn from this particular roundtable and some other things that we might be able to talk about for FFL specifically if you're looking to promote your brand, your store, or whatever you're doing through a channel like YouTube or other social media platforms? I think specifically for YouTube's purposes, there's a couple of different routes that you can go. One, I think, is kind of the entertainment route. DBoss Firearms, in particular on YouTube, they focus on funny skits, shorts, that kind of thing. And if you have a good sense of humor, this is a style that you can probably pull off quite well. Me, I'm a little too dry to try pulling off that kind of stuff, so your mileage may vary. The other kind of entertainment version that you might go for is just showing off firearms that are cool. um, full auto, rare weapons, NFA items, that kind of stuff. But here's where we start getting to the point where you might run afoul of some of the different restrictions and things like that. And it might even end up being retroactive, which is the most frustrating part of all of this stuff, is having your content get flagged when it's 6 months old, 12 months, 18 months old, because policies all of a sudden just changed and the algorithm picked up your video. Or alternatively, you could go more of the educational route. Not necessarily shooting, but more of a table talks kind of version. Informational, educational. This is something that gunsmiths might be able to go down this route very easily, but they do need to be aware of YouTube and other platform restrictions. And to read off of YouTube's content policy as of right now, quote, don't post content on YouTube if the purpose is to do one or more of the following: sell firearms or certain firearms accessories through direct sales, private sales by individuals, or links to sites that sell these items. These accessories may include accessories that enable a firearm to simulate automatic fire, accessories that convert a firearm to automatic fire, such as bump stocks, Gatling triggers, drop-in auto sears or conversion kits, high-capacity magazines or belts carrying more than 30 rounds. If you're ever wondering why your favorite YouTuber is like, hey, this is a 10-round magazine, YouTube, that's why. Provide instructions on manufacturing any of the following: firearms, ammunition, high-capacity magazines, homemade silencers, suppressors, accessories that enable a firearm to simulate automatic fire, accessories that convert a firearm to automatic fire, such as bump stocks, Gatling, blah, blah, blah. Provide instructions on how to install any of the above-mentioned accessories or modifications. Provide instructions on how to remove certain firearm safety devices, blah, blah, blah. As you can see, it is somewhat restrictive, but if you are a gunsmith wanting to go down the route of being more educational, the policy as written, at least the way it should be interpreted by YouTube, shouldn't restrict you from doing generally educational videos around gunsmithing topics. Now, the other route that you could go, especially if you are a brick and mortar or sell more than just firearms or gunsmithing services, is you could go the review route. And this you can tie in quite nicely with your own particular products and offerings by reviewing the very stuff that you actually have and carry in your store and or website. Now, this can get tricky for FFLs in some ways because you can't link directly to your website if your website is selling firearms through it. So, the first and best thing that you can do is to have some kind of a campsite, link tree, or other similar kind of landing page based website that you specifically link to help drive your traffic from YouTube to your actual website. Now, you could go even further with this particular route and spin off an entirely different DBA and have a completely separate website that's only focused on accessories and other products that YouTube is okay with being linked to for sales. I mean, heck, they run holster ads all the time for Vanish, so it should be, at least in theory, okay to link to your website if you're selling holsters and optics. Now, one of the things that I should mention with the review aspect of things is I recommend you do thorough testing or have some kind of standardized testing process that is repeatable and predictable for your viewers. Minimum round count, maybe something like some kind of a torture test, but I think it would engender a lot of trust for customers if they see you doing the same thing to all of the different products that you're reviewing of the same type. Do the same thing to all the red dots, all the scopes, all of the pistols and rifles, that kind of thing. Have a standardized testing procedure that everyone knows, hey, this is what I put this particular product through. And if you want your reviews to build brand ambassadors, specifically people who are very invested in your brand and very much trust your brand, then these are the kinds of things that you need to be doing with that kind of consistent, reliable reviews that aren't the kind of pseudo paid marketing that we see in a lot of the more larger kind of gun channels with, you know, couple three ads for this or that and an ad read in the video, yada yada yada, that kind of thing. You really do want to, if you are going the review route as a smaller channel or an FFL, be a trustworthy source of reviews. Yes, you do want to sell your product. Yes, you do want to have your sales increase through your marketing efforts, as those reviews are, but they should still be trustworthy, honest reviews. But that wraps up what I wanted to talk about for this particular section. Let me know what your thoughts are on the GunTube sphere as it is. Do you have any smaller channels that you personally would recommend? Are you an FFL? Have you experimented with any social media or YouTube-based promotions? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And for our next topic, let's briefly talk about the T-Rex Arms response video that they put up not too long ago. This, honestly, I don't think there's too much more to glean from this particular thing, but there are some additional things that I wanted to point out here. They try to be transparent, but the way that they present things do omit Lucas's side of things and spin stuff in a light slightly more favorable to them. Honestly, I understand that they're trying to defend their position and everything, but when you're spinning things like the prenup agreement, family tools being used, left out relations of the image incident offender, who the attorney was hired by for the initial agreement, other wives being employed by T-Rex, I mean, it doesn't look great. Again, I find myself falling back to mostly being on Lucas's side on this. I do want to try and be charitable to T-Rex Arms' position on things, but looking at the shareholder agreement that they posted specifically, if we look at this, there's some interesting clauses in here. Profits were split 35% to Lucas, 25% to David and David each, and there's an apostasy agreement in here, which is, I understand that the T-Rex Arms company specifically is trying to be a Christian values-oriented company, but between that and this kind of weird clause, to me, at least to me, about arbitration of the elders of the church, it seems very, very strange. I'll be honest, it rubs me the wrong way when you're saying that the elders of the church can come in and arbitrate a dispute between the stakeholders within a company. Honestly, arbitrators in legal practice are almost always going to side with normally the company versus the employee who actually brought them in, and the company's the one who pays for the arbitrator generally. So arbitration in general is kind of a lopsided kind of legal practice, and I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't know who these particular people would be or what the quality of their character is, so I'm not trying to impinge on that. It's just very strange to me that you would be running to church elders for arbitration when you would think that there would be some kind of dissolution clause in here if there's unreconcilable differences between the business partners, buyout options or something like this. Obviously, this was the plain English draft that they were talking about. That's not supposed to be overly formal or super well put together, but I do think it is kind of strange. And again, I do kind of want to still see the more recent agreements, not just this initial one, but the more recent agreements where everyone else was kind of brought in on board. specifically Isaac, and see what those agreements look like. Because, I mean, this is the first agreement. What about the second agreement that's more recent when Isaac came in? I don't know. There's some kind of gaps here that I would like to see filled out a little bit more. And then finally, I do also want to say that I think T-Rex is making a huge mistake in underestimating marketing's impact and how important it is. I think to everyone there at T-Rex Arms, Lucas was just the face of T-Rex Arms, and if anything, the support that Lucas has gotten with his departure from T-Rex Arms proves kind of the opposite. And I think they thought that T-Rex Arms was a strong brand in spite of Lucas, not because of him. And they're making that a mistake of not realizing what their brand was built off of and the personality, for better or for worse, that built that brand. And, well, yes, I don't want to see T-Rex Arms go belly up. They have made a mistake here that I do see too often in business in some fashion, forgetting marketing and neglecting it. Bottom line, if things are running poorly, sell more, or sell harder, advertise more. You should be putting more money into your marketing efforts, not less, when things are on the decline. But let's move on from the T-Rex Arms drama, as again, I just want to say I really do hope that the Botkins can come back together again as a family and heal from this whole thing. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below, and we'll move on to our next topic. And for our next topic, we'll be talking about the big, beautiful amount of BS that we've been dealing with the Trump's big, beautiful bill. We'll put aside for now the public lands sale stuff that got added in and then stripped out. I want to talk about the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act going in, then getting stripped out by the parliamentarian. This is a Democrat operative who has gone in and said that, no, the NFA's not a tax. We can't take it out per the Byrd rule. Well, the whole argument behind the NFA was the fact that it was a tax. And the Byrd rule is supposed to say that, is my understanding, the taxation issues and budgetary issues can only be done in these reconciliation bills. Okay, fine. And again, this is a rule of Congress, not a law last I checked. This was a rule. So something that they just do traditionally. The parliamentarian can be overridden and has been overridden on other things. So it really doesn't surprise me that there are plenty of gutless Republicans in the House and Senate that are more than willing to bend over backwards and let this happen. But it's just incredibly disappointing that it seems like we're headed on a trajectory where at best we'll get a consolation prize of a $0 NFA items except for machine guns, when what we had was a complete removal of suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and any other weapons from the NFA registry, just doing away with the whole scheme, with the whole taxation. It's ridiculous. And as far as I'm concerned, it would be like taxing a pencil. It's for simply being a pencil. It's ridiculous. It's something that is blatantly unconstitutional, never should have been allowed in the first place, and we finally have a chance to actually get rid of it, and what happens? We get stabbed in the back by rhinos again. Well, the only thing that I can say is I will continue to keep an eye on this and see how things go. I will admit I'm not a one party or one issue voter. There are other things that I care about besides the Second Amendment, but this is top on my priorities list when it comes to things that could be done with this particular bill. And I really hope that the Republicans in the House and the Senate are able to grow a backbone and actually get this through. Because if it does, that would be incredibly helpful to American industry. Because guess what? That means there's going to be increased demand for these particular type of items. There's going to be increased need for people to make those items. There's going to be people wanting to buy those items. So it should be a win-win-win. But honestly, if the Giffords, this would have passed. Heck, the NFA never would have even existed if the firearms lobby was as powerful as the Giffords lobby seems to think we are. But hey, let me know what your thoughts are on the Short Act and the Hearing Protection Act being removed or turned into $0 items in the current version of the Big Beautiful Bill in the comments section. And again, I would encourage you to contact your Congress critter, let them know what your opinions are on the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act in their proper form, staying in the Big Beautiful Bill. But let's move on to our next topic. Next up in news from Shooting News Weekly, we actually have some good things coming out of the ATF for once. Kind of. Well, it's a win. It's a win, but it's a little win. The ATF is now reinterpreting their rules to allow the imports of UTM, simunition training rounds, and dual-use barrels. Basically, the long and short of this is these items were restricted, particularly dual-use barrels were restricted for the past 2 decades from being imported because they could be used for both simunitions and sporting purposes. So it was a weird mess of we're going to have our cake and eat it too when it comes to the language of the law. Same thing with simulated ammunition or simunitions. But the ATF, in a actually intelligent decision, has reversed their position and rulings on both of these particular items now. So both of them are now allowed for import, both dual-use barrels for simunitions as well as the simunitions themselves being no longer actually considered ammunition, which they never were. Finally, some frickin' logic out of the ATF, I swear. But I do think that this is interesting because if the red tape around these particular items is going down, maybe we'll see a increased wave of interest in the type of force-on-force simulated training that these kinds of simunitions allow for. Maybe this is something that ranges could start taking a look at as an additional offering for training services to LEOs and civilians alike, since the red tape is going down or almost going away. I would have to do a ton of market research before I could give you a proper opinion as to whether or not, hey, this is a good idea or not. But I do think it is something to consider and worth looking into if that is something that your range or training services doesn't already provide as an additional offering. But at least food for thought, if nothing else. Well, let me know what your thoughts are on the ATF actually doing something right for once. And let me know, would you be interested, if you're an average shooter, for any like simulated force-on-force training? Is this something that you'd be willing to pay for? Let me know in the comments section below. But let's move on to our next topic. So for our next topic, I actually wanted to talk about some new and interesting technological innovations within the firearms industry. First up, I wanted to talk about PMAX Tactical and Frytech. So what's interesting about this is Frytech has a magnetic buffer system design that he's adapted to a number of different platforms. Let's see here. Basically, replacing your standard hydraulic or spring buffer tube system with a magnetically driven one. He also has a number of other prototypes that he's working on for, I believe it is magnetic locking systems and delays, but this is actually very interesting to me. Some of the videos that he's posted are actually rather interesting because it seems like his claims of this buffer system dramatically reducing recoil, as you can see here in the video, actually seem like they might pan out here. And if this system can prove to be durable with longevity testing and come in at a reasonable price point, I think this could be the next thing we see in upgrades for AR-15 pattern rifles. This is really interesting to me, and it's something that I've been keeping my eye on for some time. Also, is other experiments with recoil systems for pistols as well seem to be bearing fruit as well. He has shown that they're working and at least capable of cycling as well, with some early prototypes that he's shown off on his Twitter. So if this is something that interests you, check out Frytech LLC on Twitter, X, however you want to say it, and, follow along. PMax Tactical is going to be releasing some products leveraging the buffer tube system and doing some testing as well. So I'm excited to see what that will look like in terms of price point, performance, etc. Because if these recoil reduction claims pan out and we have video proof of it actually working, this is some pretty exciting stuff, at least to me, who's a bit of an engineering nerd. But they're not the only, but Frytech is not the only one who's trying to push the technology envelope forward. There is Outlier's backdraft suppressor setup. Now, this video a few weeks ago from Ballistic High Speed shows off the particular design and how it functions internally. Essentially, instead of adding all of the baffle space to the front of the firearm, they're actually taking advantage of the space around the barrel itself and redirecting the gases back around the barrel. This, I think, is about as much volume as you're ever going to get for a suppressor to trap gas and release it slowly while it's expanding. I've seen some really crazy designs, especially on some of these flow-through suppressors to try and redirect the gases and everything like that, but this backdraft barrel design and suppressor system here is really interesting because I'm not entirely sure how you could get that much more volume without making some comically long suppressor system. And this might be where suppressors kind of stop in terms of raw volume capable of trapping gases. But I did want to bring this to your guys' attention because it's another interesting system. Backdraft, or Outlier, their backdraft technology is supposed to be coming out here relatively soon. So keep your eye on it. If this is something that interests you, definitely interests me. And last but not least, for our technology stuff, Lima 6 actually has a little bit of an update for us. I've been following along with the progress of Lima 6 for quite some time now, and I'm really interested in this particular project because we're talking about an AR-15 style upper that's belt fed, that's actually affordable. I believe the price point that he's trying to come in at for initial production units is around 2,500 excuse me, 2,500 for a build kit, and I believe it's 3K for a fully assembled upper. That's pretty dang competitive. And in this video, Harvey talks about his history, background, where he stands with the current project in terms of the beta units that are being produced right now for initial testing. And it's really exciting for me to see this go forward because I have been following along for a while now. But but one of the things that Harvey also mentioned in his video is that he specifically wants to bring the production costs down over time. And obviously, as additional machining and economies of scale start to kick in, if this thing really does take off, I think you could probably definitely fulfill on that goal of getting that cost down further. But if you are interested, like me, in a belt-fed AR-15 upper and don't want to spend the ridiculous price points for the one or two other options that are actually out there on the market, check out Lima 6. It's at Lima 6 Underground at L6 Underground on X. Check out Harvey, follow along with his project. I'm really interested to see this come to market. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the Frytech buffer system, the backdraft suppressor technology, as well as Lima 6 belt feds in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you guys. But I think that wraps up all of our topics for today. Quick channel update. I have a number of projects that I'm currently working on. I have a 357 SIG video that I am currently working on and doing the research for that I can put together. Thank you to the viewer who suggested that particular topic. I am working on it. I do also have some other things in the production pipeline as well. And I think a little project that I have just about completed that I think you guys will be interested in terms of the FBI ballistics testing and doing some wider scope analysis of it. I think my fellow gun nerds will find this interesting. But of course, our next goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers. So if you would like, share, comment, and subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. I try to respond to all of the comments in the comment section below. But until next time, I'm Anders, E.T. Herzberg for the Cap Ball Saloon, hoping to see you all again real soon.